The 2016 Giro d'Italia was the race's 99th edition. For the third time, the Giro started in the Netherlands with a 9.8-kilometer individual time trial. After 3 stages in Holland, the race did a massive transfer to the toe of the Italian boot. The route took the riders in an almost straight line up the center of the peninsula before heading to the northeast for the Dolomites, steep limestone mountains that are part of the Southern Alps. The Giro's finale followed, with long hard days in the Alps near the French border. By historical standards, this was a very hard Grand Tour. Big, strong Tom Dumoulin won the opening time trial, but the contenders such as Vincenzo Nibali, Alejandro Valverde, and Steven Kruijswijk were clustered about a half-minute behind. The race was on. The next 2 stages were over level Dutch roads, the perfect playground for super sprinter Marcel Kittel, who won both. Heading down to Italy, Kittel was both the overall and points leader. The first Italian stage had just enough climbing to challenge Kittel, but Dumoulin was not deterred. Coming in just a few seconds after stage winner Diego Ulissi, Dumoulin sprinted against Steven Kruijswijk to come in second, with the rest of the contenders just behind them. Dumoulin was back in pink. The next day, the other German flash, André Greipel, took the stage win. Stage 6 was the first mountain stage with a hilltop finish at Roccaraso, a ski town in the Abruzzo region. As expected, a small group escaped on the final climb, and from there, Lotto Soudal rider Tim Wellens escaped to win the stage in the most dramatic way, though Dumoulin continued to lead. Greipel won the next day, but the next 2 stages shook things up. Riding through hilly Tuscany in stage 8, Gianluca Brambilla came into Arezzo more than a minute ahead of his nearest chaser, giving him both the stage win and the pink jersey. Brambilla's ownership of the Maglia Rosa survived the stage 9 40-kilometer time trial, but just barely. He held the race leadership, but just a single second over Bob Jungels. Following the second rest day, Brambilla's lead was going to get a serious test with a tough day of racing in the mountains north of Florence. Brambilla failed his test, coming in more than 3 minutes behind stage winner Giulio Ciccone. More importantly, a minute behind Jungels. Jungels was now the leader of the Giro d'Italia. The hills kept coming. Stage 11 was flat until the final 20 kilometers. That broke things up, a bit. Diego Ulissi led in the 2 riders at the top of the general classification, Bob Jungels and Andre Amador. Tom Dumoulin, who had led the Giro in its early stages, was tormented with saddle sores and had to climb off his bike 95 kilometers into the stage. His Giro was over. Another flat stage, another victory for one of the German speedsters. With the race on the flat roads near Venice, André Greipel won a stage that was almost custom-made for him. Stage 13 signaled that it was time for the Dolomites. Before the 170-kilometer stage began, there were some notable non-starters, including André Greipel, who thought his time would be better spent getting ready for the next race rather than being dropped in stage after stage. Marcel Kittel had abandoned before the stage 9 time trial. The peloton had let a break gain some real time, and from that break, Sky rider Mikel Nieve went solo with 35 kilometers to go. He still had 43 seconds in hand when he crossed the line. More importantly, during the hilly stage, Bob Jungels wasn't able to stay with Andre Amador, allowing Amador to take the lead with Jungels in second place, a half-minute back. Now came the big stuff, with the Giro's Queen stage. Still in the Dolomites, stage 14 went over several of the legendary climbs of the Italian Tour, the Pordoi, Sella, Gardena, Campolongo, Gio, and Valparola before finishing in Corvara. Italian hope Vincenzo Nibali was in the action, and the big guns hammered each other in the stage's later kilometers. But Esteban Chaves was on fire, being the first of the winning trio, followed by Steven Kruijswijk and Georg Preidler. Nibali came in a half-minute later. Kruijswijk's superb riding made him the Giro's new Maglia Rosa. Before the final rest day, there was a 10.8-kilometer timed individual hill climb. The winner was a rider no one had predicted, Gazprom Rusvela rider Alexander Foliferov. But only fractions of a second slower was Kruijswijk. At the end of 2 weeks, Kruijswijk was the leader with Chaves 2 minutes 12 seconds behind, and Nibali a further 39 seconds back. Nibali had suffered a terrible stage with a drop chain requiring a new bike that cost him both time and mental momentum. The mountains kept coming. Stage 16 had long climbs and descents. The bomb exploded on the Paso de la Mendola. Bob Jungels was among the 6 riders who flew the coupe, and on his own, Kruijswijk closed the gap to the escapees. Then Alejandro Valverde attacked, putting Nibali out the back door. Valverde won the stage with race leader Kruijswijk finishing with him. Kruijswijk now had a 3-minute lead over Chavez. After a sprinter stage, Stage 18 was the year's longest stage with a second category Pramartino ascent near the finish. Though it broke things up, Kruijswijk lost no time. Meanwhile, the Italian press buzzed endlessly about Nibali, assuming he must have something wrong with him since he was nearly 5 minutes behind Kruijswijk. In fact, Nibali was fighting an intestinal infection that began with a bout of dysentery the night before the timed hill climb. Of course, Nibali did not want his competition to know about his illness. Stage 19 was a monster. Though a normal 162 kilometers long, it involved a very long ascent to the crest of the Colle dell'Agnello, followed then with a hilltop finish at Risoul. And whatever microbes Nibali had been fighting, they had been defeated, as was the entire Giro peloton that day. Following a series of attacks on the Agnello ascent, Nibali, Kruijswijk, and Esteban Chavez were clear. Kruijswijk misjudged a corner on the slippery, snowy descending road, crashing into a snowbank. He remounted, but the combination of time lost remounting and changing bikes, as well as his injuries, meant he would finish too far behind the leaders to remain in the lead. Nibali attacked on the final climb, and Chavez was unable to respond. Nibali came in alone with Chavez almost a minute behind. Chavez was the Maglia Rosa, with Nibali 44 seconds behind. The penultimate stage was another day in the high mountains, with 4 challenging ascents and not a single flat kilometer to be found. On the penultimate climb, Nibali went, and Chavez couldn't meet the challenge and came in about a minute and a half after Nibali. Vincenzo Nibali had won the 2016 Giro d'Italia.